Welcome to Saints on Cinema. I am Tim Wild.
And I am Josh Edlow.
Yeah, and tonight we are doing a two or more witnesses discussion on the amazing, highly anticipated and excited Christopher Robin. Is it Robin or Robbins? Robin? Robin. There's only one of them. So Christopher Robin, which Josh and I, if you watched our Revelation episode on the trailer when that came out originally, we're very excited and optimistic about this movie. And now we're going to give you our full reaction, having seen it, in this spoiler-free conversation. And we're going to do two videos. This one is just completely spoiler-free. If you're watching one that's longer, then it'll say spoiler-free and spoilers discussion. If it just says spoiler-free, then you just watch that and then go see the movie and tell us what you think. Unless we tell you not to go see the movie, there's your cliffhanger for later.
Wow.
All right. So first of all we want to do in this video is just talk about just our general impressions of the movie and how we felt about it. If it's worth seeing in the theater, that's what we really get to in our discussions. But also, I just want to talk about the characters, things I really liked and otherwise about the characters. And now, before we get into it, just keep in mind that this franchise was very dear to the hearts of both me and Josh. Am I right, Josh, or am I speaking for us ignorantly?
No, that's very true. Winnie the Pooh was a major staple of my childhood.
Staple. Wow. So it was a staple in Josh's life, just like the staples in Pooh's stomach that kept seams from coming undone, so his life would have been undone if it wasn't for Winnie the Pooh.
Wow. That's deep.
All right. Anyway, so going into it with that premise that Josh and I love these characters, I was always so touched in every Winnie the Pooh movie because there was a tender place in my heart for keeping that inner childhood, that connection to your imaginary experiences, the creations of your life, your toys and the adventures you went on. And that was what always dear to me, and that's what I love about this story. And I've never watched one of the main movies, the original ones by Disney, not all the spin-off series that they've done, but the main movies. I've never watched one without crying. And you too?
No, I've definitely watched them without crying. Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't. I mean, you always have that moment at the end of the movie when he's either on the bridge or on the hill, and he's having that conversation, trying to break it down to Pooh that he's going to be going off to school, and they're trying to figure out what school is, and they're trying to piece it together and cope with it. And that's the part that was always sad, the separation of those two best friends. That meant so much. I always had a hard time with that. I don't know. Maybe it's because I moved around a lot as a kid and I always had to go through a similar experience, but I don't know. But this movie, I'm going to say it did not exactly tug at my heartstrings the ways I was hoping it would. That's what I was excited about, I was actually intimidated by this movie reaching it, because I love Ewan McGregor and I love the way the animation looked. And I was really excited about it. It just didn't quite reach that tier in my heart that Winnie the Pooh always has been able to catch in the past. Did you feel at all like that? Or is that kind of how you got out of it? I know obviously you're too macho to cry in a movie, but...
This movie, so it was different for me. Like, it wasn't, there were a couple of scenes that did tug at the heartstrings, but it was a different feeling. Just because of the way that the story was and the different place that Christopher Robin was in his life, and the different issues that he was dealing with. In this movie, I felt like it did tug at my heartstrings at certain points, but I think it was a different type of feeling for me than the original movies. There was some nostalgia to it, which I thought was nice and cute and fun, but it was a different feeling that I was expecting to get out of it.
Was it satisfying emotionally for you?
Yeah. Yes. Here's my problem, and this is why I struggle with how I feel about the movie. Is I have very high expectations. I have a very emotional reaction to the original movie, so I don't know how much of my, I wouldn't say dissatisfaction, but I was not as satisfied as I would hope. But I think that some of that may have been the fact that I was I walked in thinking that it was going to blow my mind and it was going to be a great continuation of my childhood, and it did not meet the expectation that I was expecting, but it was still good. Also, I had some problems with the story that we'll probably get into in the spoiler version of the video. But overall, I'm glad I saw it, and I'm glad I had. I'm glad I got to share it with my kids, and I thought that the characters were well done.
Okay, agreed. I think that's where I was at too. I think I had an expectation, not because we watch trailers and we get too overhyped and we have too high expectations for certain movies, but this is a franchise, this is a piece that Disney has always been able to hit me. And I think that's why I went into it expecting to be hit, and I wasn't. And I think if it was compared to like a regular movie, it would have been emotional enough that I would have been very satisfied. But for a movie about Winnie the Pooh, it didn't hit me where I needed it to in my heart. So I don't know. That's how I felt as well. And you mentioned going with your kids, and I took my kids tonight. Let me ask you, how did the kids in the theater or your kids react to it? Did they enjoy it, laugh?
So it's interesting. My oldest son said he felt it was just okay. And my girls seem to like it, and my youngest seemed to like it as well. But I don't know if my youngest necessarily, like my youngest two, even remember watching the original Winnie the Pooh. It's not a staple of their childhood to watch it. They've seen it, but it hasn't been something they've seen over and over again, one that they watch over and over again. So that was their reactions. I didn't get as strong a reaction as I thought I would. And I didn't have as strong a reaction as I thought I would.
What about the jokes and the dialogue? Was it well received? Was there laughter in the theater?
Yeah, there was a little bit, not as much as I would have hoped, but yeah, there was some good things. And I thought that there were definitely some scenes that were sad. Like there was just this movie if I had a word to describe it, I'd say the movie was just sad.
Yeah,
you know, most of it. It was a sad movie, a sad state of affairs.
But not like Winnie the Pooh, which is a fun adventure that ends with, well, the story's over, we have to grow up. It's just it wasn't sad like that, where you had a fun, entertaining ride, and then at the end there's a twist where you're like, oh, he's going off to school. The whole tone of this movie was sad and kind of dismal. I agree.
Yeah.
Now, do you feel it's a little too much like Hook? Because that's what the perception was, and that's how I was comparing to Hook the whole time. But do you feel it's too much like that?
No, I don't think it was anything like Hook.
Anything like Hook?
No, I don't.
Because I have a list of things that were reminding me of Hook completely.
Yeah, I didn't think so, and the reason I didn't think so is because, granted, this is a situation where, like Peter Pan, Christopher Robin is kind of trying to find himself and who he was, so there's that. But it was a completely different movie in that he just didn't know who he was. He didn't even realize that that's who he was or where he came from. And Christopher Robin, his story is more about he knows where he came from. He just is having a hard time in adulthood holding on to those things that were important to him when he was a kid.
Fair enough. I just think there was a lot of imagery and a lot of the tone and some of the scenes that were kind of set up very similarly. That kind of, I don't know if it was a rip-off from Hook, but it was definitely a version, a recreation of it. So I think.
Here's the thing about Hook that I think is different than Pooh, is that you have to go in to Christopher Robin and understand that this is a movie that's going to tug at your heartstrings, because if you're an adult who has the weight of responsibility and you've grown up and you've kind of changed who you are to be kind of more grown up and responsible, and you look back and it's kind of depressing because you look at it and you're like, man, it's true. Well, like what happens in the movie is true. It's a commentary on what happens to us, and I'll get into the undertones of it as well that annoy the crap out of me. But like, there's a lot of that too, and be prepared for that, because it's also a commentary on capitalism as well and that stuff, which is always annoying. But I think it's more a commentary on what happens to us as we grow older. And because of that, the movie takes a tone that is very sad and depressing throughout, with a twist at the end that makes it kind of more hopeful. But at the same time, with Hook, like I felt like in Hook, you always had a hope that things were going to work out. And there was always entertaining, funny stuff going on. And there was always goofy, Robin Williams, who was just being goofy the whole time, and lots of funny characters. In this, it almost felt like Where the Wild Things Are, if you weren't watching that.
Right.
It was just sad. Great movie, sad, So
there's just one thing I want to talk about without going into the spoilers of any specifics. Obviously, we know from the trailer that it's been very clear that the animated characters are alive, and in the trailer, it shows that they're in the city and going around, and people can see them. It shows that, right?
I don't think it shows a lot of it, but yes. I mean, that's a
right, maybe I'll save that for trailer or for. Never mind. I'll save that then. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, something I liked about this movie is you do get a good chunk of a live action 100 Acre Wood, and you get small pieces of some characters that I wish had a stronger role. Though yes. I think the main characters had plenty of screen time. The ones that most people love the most had a lot of screen time.
And that's not spoiling. We can say right there, Pooh was excellent. Pooh was really well done, very true to character. And I love that that Jim Cummings came back and did the voice. It was perfect. It was like watching a real Winnie the Pooh. It was great.
And Eeyore was fantastic.
Absolutely. And I remember in our Revelations discussion, that's what you were concerned about, him being way too, too emo. And he wasn't really like that. He had the dialogue, he had the clips that were really funny and engaging throughout all of the story, the whole plot. He was kind of there with his little Eeyore commentary, and I loved it. It was really funny.
Yeah. I also thought that Tigger was well done.
He was all right. He was kind of there, but not Tigger. He wasn't. I mean, he was just like the script for Tigger, but not. He wasn't like capturing or stealing the scenes like Tigger should. I don't mean like becoming the main attraction, but when Tigger jumps into the movie, remember he didn't come in until like the third chapter of the original movie, but then he stole the show. And I don't think he needs to be the center of the entire thing, like his own movie. But Tigger, when he's there, he's supposed to like capture your excitement, and I didn't really feel that.
I thought he was well done. I thought that the guy hit the voice well. I thought that there were a couple scenes that were really great, but I do agree. Tigger in the original, he comes on and he is just, he's like ADD, super intense Tigger, on the verge of annoying Tigger.
Right?
That's kind of his part of his charm. And he wasn't that strong, but I felt he did well in that. And there was a couple of nostalgic moments in there that were really cool too. But yeah, I wish there would have been more screen time for Kanga and Roo, Owl, and Rabbit. And
mostly Rabbit. I don't really care about the others. The only thing with Owl didn't have his dialogue. He's supposed to have his rambling, talking about his great uncle or something, telling some story that was very, very distantly related to whatever they came to ask him for advice about or whatever they were talking about, and he was supposed to bore them. That didn't happen. He kind of starts talking about something very early on, but it's very quick and moves off. But I didn't feel like Owl did anything that was Owl-like. And Rabbit is Rabbit dealing with him because he's just kind of in the way. He's just so ignorant and so slow and just simple. He's such a simplified character. He just wants honey. He just stumbles on and he gets in Rabbit's way, whatever Rabbit's trying to do. But Rabbit trying to be so hyper and intense about everything, it's just funny watching them together. And Rabbit didn't play a big part in this story at all and didn't even have any real good scenes. That was my big disappointment.
Yeah. So yeah, there were some things that I would have done a little differently, but I thought it still, I liked how I felt like they had a really good portion in the 100 Acre Wood. And I think that the stuff they did in England was well done as well. And I thought that the interactions between Christopher Robin and his daughter were well done. And I thought his daughter played a great role.
They're all right. And I
Well,
love Ewan McGregor, and I was so excited about him playing it, but it was just okay. That
no,
stuff.
I thought Ewan McGregor did a great job with what he had, and
Yes. Yeah.
so he played. I could feel his stress when he was stressed. I could understand why he was stressed. Uh, and why he was all frustrated. I could understand where he was coming from and how he was justified in his mind and what he was doing,
Right.
and it hit home for me because a lot of the things that he feels in his job, I have felt in mine. So, like in my life, and I think we all have, like all of us, we have responsibility, and we're trying to raise kids and do the right things, and still trying to maintain some level of sanity and maturity in our lives to be like, still childlike. Sometimes that goes away for a certain amount of time because of all the responsibility, and I think that he played that very, very well.
Now we stopped going into the 5 categories that we used to rate our movies on when we were giving scores for our reviews. But I just want to mention a couple of things with some of those topics or the categories. But music, I didn't feel drawn in by the music, and I didn't even feel like it was very good music, like that was pulling me in, like a John Williams score or something would have done, similar to Hook. It just didn't grow or grip. I can't say grow. It just didn't like grab me.
I hope it didn't
And yeah, and the thing is I don't know if you noticed this, but in the very beginning part when I was trying to portray his being so distant in his family and everything, and the workaholic stuff and everything, before he got carried away on the adventure, there was no music. It was just all him walking around and talking at the office or with his wife and interacting with his daughter. There was no music going behind it, which I think can have an effect. But in this one, it just slowed down a very slow-paced movie that was already dragging. And I don't think he jumped into it with this excitement. The opening scene where it shows him with his friends, that's another problem. I think they jumped in to show the characters way too early. It was very like, there they are. They didn't ease into it and reveal the characters very excitingly at all, and I had a problem with that. But the tone, it just started, like you say, kind of dark. It felt like Up, in the movie Up, when they had this devastating opening. It was all sad and everything, and this wasn't like a sad opening, but it was very, it was a very melancholy tone, and you're just trying to think about all the things from what happened when he was a child to now him being grown up. Hook did the same thing, but they did it with a little more engagement, a little more enthusiasm. But you still could see where he was without it being so like, oh, you're killing me. Like it was an old British drama, and it just didn't move. It didn't get going fast enough for me.
Yeah, I think it would have had a stronger effect if it did have a stronger score in the time when he's on his adventure. Like, yeah, because there's not a real strong contrast there. Because I feel
if it picked up like Wizard of Oz, it's all black and white, and then boom, it explodes with all this color. They could have done something similar with the music. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, so I think that would have been a better contrast, and I think that might have been what they were going with, right? Like at the beginning, to have no music is that, the music signifies, imagination and childlike humor and fun. Having no music is kind of gloomy. That's kind of where you want it to be, and then burst onto this thing and him trying to find himself. I also felt like in this movie, the finding himself took a long time to kind of go through and the struggle, which is fine. I mean, it told the story very well. I felt like the story was, basically him trying to find himself and go back to have a balance in his life, right? And that's kind of what he's looking for, and finding that balance.
That basic concept of the story was told very well, but there was a lot of what is going on moments, and we'll talk about that.
There were some, and there's some things I was confused about after I thought about it for a while. But overall, I think it's not so that we don't make this a super long, non-spoiler, spoiler-free video.
Yeah.
Don't give away too much. I think it's worth seeing. I think that people who like Winnie the Pooh are going to enjoy seeing some of their favorite characters in live action. I think that they looked really well, like really well done. They would be exactly what I would imagine these characters to look like if in live action. It wasn't a lot like Smurfs, where like it was kind of, goofy like that, where it was, you were in Smurfland or whatever you want to call it, and then in the real world, it did.
Smurf Village.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I didn't really care about those movies, but anyway, they that it wasn't like that. It was more. I thought it was more well done, and it's yeah, it just had a different feel. Just go in and understanding that this is not going to be your typical Winnie the Pooh, happy-go-lucky adventure movie. It's going to be different, and it's going to have a different feel, but still good.
Okay, so Celestial, see it in the theater. Terrestrial, wait, or get it on DVD or Blu-ray, and Telestial, Redbox if you get around to it.
I don't think this is a movie you need to see in the theater. I think that I would say it's terrestrial because I think that any true Disney fan who collects the Disney movies would want this as part of their collection. So I would say it's a movie that you could go out and just purchase, understanding that it's going to be worth the time to own it as a Disney movie for hardcore Disney fans.
Agreed. I already have it. I think it is absolutely a terrestrial movie. Not worth seeing in the theater. There's no sound that's like blowing you away. There's not amazing effects or anything. But I'll say one thing about seeing in the theater that I think is unique is you would have a much better view of the texture of the characters, and they had so much detail that even the different creatures, the different stuffed animals, they all had different materials they were made out of, and like there was snag marks in Pooh's shirt and stuff like that. A lot of depth and character that personalized them. That was really cool. But to see the different texture that each of them had with the different fabrics that they were made out of was really cool. Did you notice that, how unique they all were? Some were a little smoother and cleaner than others.
Yeah, I did notice that. And I also want to go back and about this terrestrial celestial thing, and that is that it's very hard for me now with the advent of 4K television and really strong HD to justify going to the theater for any movie that's not like a big budget have to see in the theater with amazing sound and amazing score. So with that understanding, like I just go to movies all the time, and so I'm gonna see it in the theater. But if you're someone who's a movie buff and you like going to the theater and it's something that you enjoy doing with your significant other, or you like taking your kids to a movie, this is certainly one that you can see in the theater and not feel like it was a waste of money. That's not what we're saying.
Agreed.
We're just saying that this is not a movie that if you're like looking for something to go out in the theater, you're much better to go see a Marvel epic or like a Skyscraper. Maybe I didn't watch your review because I haven't seen the movie yet, but like
it's that experience, the visuals, the audio, the sound to be enclosed and captured in this movie. That's what the theater experience is for, and what we're talking about. This movie did not require that to enjoy it. Save your money, get it on DVD if you want to collect it, which you should. It's really good. Well,
yeah.
It's
a movie that you're definitely going to want as part of your Disney collection.
Okay. So there you have it. That's our spoiler-free review of Christopher Robin. And if you go see it and you want to come back and watch our spoiler version, you can either continue if you're watching this one that has the full-length review and discussion, or you can just come back and click on it, and we'll have the timestamp and to go forward in the video to the spoiler section. But we enjoyed it. It was fun. A little disappointing in a few things that we're going to get into now. But if you're just watching the spoiler-free version, then for Saints on Cinema, I'm Tim Wild.
And I am Josh Hedlow, but we're not really done. So here we go.
Okay, so I had a lot of problems with this movie, but first of all, I just want to mention a few things about the characters that I liked and some things I didn't like. First of all, Christopher Robin. I liked how they did him as a kid, but this is my problem with the transition and the tone. Like I said, they threw you right into the characters. You jumped right in, and they showed in the movie, in the trailer, they showed the little party, the little going away, congratulations, Christopher Robin, whatever it was, where they were saying goodbye. I didn't like that. I wanted to have them slowly introduce the characters in a different way, or show them one by one. In the trailer, you saw Pooh or go find Christopher Robin or whatever, and pull him back into the 100 Acre Woods, and then he was coming upon the characters one by one. I wanted the audience to experience that, kind of like the Jungle Book. If you remember the Jungle Book in the live action, you knew all the characters, but as he went and discovered them, you're like, oh, here's Ka. I can tell because of the shadow and everything. Oh, here's the monkey. Oh, we're coming along, coming up to Baloo scene. King Louis, but like you could see where as the story was going, who was coming next, and you were kind of excited about that. This one, it wasn't like that. It was just, here they all are, and it was a kind of a dumb scene. Not dumb, but it was just kind of a pointless scene. And then, okay, now he's going to grow up. You know what I thought would have been kind of cool? Or do you disagree with that?
I mean, yeah, I think it probably, if I were, writing it or directing it, I probably would have started it where they were, where Pooh and him were just sitting there when he's about ready to leave, and just have the two of them,
Yeah, I would have been fine with just seeing Pooh.
Yeah, and just having them say, I'm off to school again and blah, blah, blah. And, I don't know if I'm going to be coming back. It's time to grow up. Like, I would have been fine with that. And so I guess, yeah. I mean, I didn't have a big problem with it. It sounds like you did.
I was just so excited about that. I was excited to see the characters. That was the whole thing, was like, what are they going to look like? How are they going to act? How are they going to sound? And the trailers didn't get too revealing of those characters, but 5 minutes of the movie, there they all are, fully interacting and talking. And you saw the whole party. I was just kind of like, hey, you got to suck me in a little bit, kind of build it up to it a little bit, because these are classic, beloved characters, and they just like threw them on the screen right at the beginning. It was just a little, there was no setup, and that's all. And you know what? Here's the thought I had. Oh, go ahead.
So, yeah, because it did seem like they were trying to do a reveal type thing, like when he came back to the 100 Acre Wood, because like he comes upon Pooh and then Pooh disappears. Then he finds Eeyore. Then he found Owl next. Or no, he didn't find Owl next.
Piglet. He finds Piglet, and then he leads them to all of them hiding, and they're in the shadow. You can barely see him. And it's like, oh, that's kind of cool. But we've already seen him in broad daylight like 10 minutes ago, well, half an hour ago.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I could see where you're coming from there. But I didn't have a huge problem with it per se.
That was our problem. The scene, I love this scene, and that was the same scene from the end of the original movie. It was that whole conversation, where he's talking about, he didn't talk to him specifically about going to school, and he walked him all the way to the door, but he said, what are we going to do? He's like, we're doing nothing. And that all that dialogue was like almost word for word similar to what was in the movie. And I like that because it captured you remembering or knowing that this was this story, and now we're going to continue it years later. And I love the opening credits, how they did that. I didn't like the little drawing on paper animation they did. It was a weird style. I understand they're trying to do this traditional old book with old paper. It just kind of looked kind of weird. The way they drew the characters, it just, I don't know. I don't know if that has some significance to the way the original art looked in the book or something. I don't know. But I didn't like the way they did that animation for the credits, but I love the credits. I love how they said chapter 1, here's him growing up. Chapter 2, he goes to school. Chapter 3, he meets his wife, all that stuff. And then it showed little clips of him going through his life. I thought that was really cool. And that reminded me of Up. And I was like, okay, we're catching up. And the music was good right there. And you were like, okay, now we already know a little bit about who Christopher Robin is as an adult. We have an idea of what he's been through and the transition, how he was with his wife. They were dancing and everything. He used to be full of life and full of imagination. And then he's an adult, and now we see him change because of the war. And I thought that was really cool. My son had to lean over and ask about that. And I thought that was neat. It was a neat tone to kind of twist it right there on why it gave a reason to him becoming so serious. I mean, he wasn't responsible for these soldiers, but he cared about them. And that's the heart of Chris Romney. He served his friends. He took care of his friends in the 100 Acre Wood. And he always wanted to do things and help them. And now he's in a war watching people die and struggle. So he brought that, he had that intention of his business success. He was looking out for the people. And that's what when you saw him first go in the office, he was trying, where are we going to cut money? Where are we going to cut money? And I was like, oh, he's obsessed with money. But no, then they revealed that he was just doing it to look for cuts to preserve the people's jobs. And I thought that was awesome. This is Christopher Robin.
Yeah, I thought that good twist, the adding the war part to it, because that is really, I mean, in the time period that this was written, that would have happened to somebody like Christopher Robin. He would have gone off to fight in the war, and that does change you, so that totally makes sense. And I also liked how in the meantime of that, you go back to the 100 Acre Wood and you still see Pooh kind of waiting for his friend to come back, and he doesn't.
I thought that just get you. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that was good. And so
as seasons change, they did that Twilight trick, but as seasons change, while he's there coming back and forth, just waiting, that loyal friend, that's what it eats me up. Go ahead.
I also thought I saw a lot of symbolism in the idea that when Christopher Robin was at the height of his stress and at the height of all this stuff, and where he's kind of losing himself and his family. That was the time when the 100-Acre Wood was getting so dark and dreary, and all of the friends had kind of disappeared, and it was just Pooh left.
I didn't notice that, but you're right. There was like well, that kind of bothers me though. There was a connection between things in his life and how connected he was to his imaginary friends.
Yeah, and so here's the thing that I would say my biggest gripe of the movie, and I wasn't sure how to feel about it. Well, I have two, but this is one of the big ones. So everyone can see Pooh and everybody.
Thank you.
Are these not imaginary friends?
That's the whole point of the story, is his adventures with his stuffed animals in his room, and his interacting with them and playing with them, and the things in his imagination that he brought them to life, and they represented different attitudes and experiences and feelings that he had. And he grew up and he had to abandon his childlike toys, and he had to be mature and grow up, and he forgot about that. That's what the magic of Winnie the Pooh is, that your childhood toys and your imagination, that side of you, that inner child, is always going to be there. Right next to the natural man within us is that inner child. And in this movie, it's like, oh, but everyone can see him. So is it magic? Is the 100-Acre Woods a real place, like in Stranger Things or something? I was like, what are they doing? Go ahead.
So I was confused about that, because at times I thought, okay, this is his imagination. Like the whole thing about how the 100-Acre Wood was kind of getting dark, almost like the never-ending story, right? Like the nothing was coming, and they were all kind of disappearing. And I thought, okay, that's because he's getting to a point in his head where he's just completely forgotten all about everything, and the only thing that he can remember is Pooh, truly is Pooh. And the reason he can remember Pooh is because she showed him the picture of Pooh, and that's the only reason why he can recognize Pooh, is because he saw the picture.
And I thought that too.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden they come out in the real world and everyone can just see him. And I'm like, and in my mind I'm going, okay, well, wait a minute, are we going to see somewhere here where this is just him imagining that everyone can see him?
Yeah. When he was first carrying Pooh, when he was walking down the street trying to get to the train with Pooh, that's what I thought they were going to do. I thought it was going to be him carrying a stuffed animal and just talking to it, or not seeing him and talking to it, because I was just kind of him and Pooh for a little bit. And I think that almost would have been better.
Yeah, and so yeah, I almost felt like I wanted like a Calvin and Hobbes deal here, where like, Hobbes comes to life. You're frozen.
In his imagination.
Yeah, he comes to life in his imagination. But that didn't seem to it was just confusing. Like, okay, so they're real or they're not. And I would have even been okay if like his daughter could see them and nobody else.
That would have been fine.
That would have been fine. Or even if his daughter and his wife could see them after he explained what they meant. Okay, like that.
That's part of his childhood. He's talked to them about these characters.
Yeah, but like because wasn't there a scene where like, there was a scene where the cabbie was like freaking out because they were all talking. You know what I mean? Like,
he crashed. They were in the back seat. He got distracted and crashed into a stack of newspapers or something. The guy was at the newspaper stand was all mad, and the cop came up. And he was like, "No, I'm glad you guys are here." He starts talking about the stuffed animals, and then the girl's like, I'm a witness and everything to this accident, but there's my dad. Can I go? And he's like, Pop's like, oh, go, get out of here, darling. And then and then the other guy sees the animated is Eeyore. He sees Eeyore, and then he's like, he makes that face, and the other guy's like, oh, that's the face I made. And so he's like, okay, but we don't pursue, we don't follow, we don't question. We're just gonna have this end of this scene.
Yeah.
Okay. Now resume story.
Yeah, there was that. The other thing that was kind of confusing is I didn't understand what the purpose of the neighbor who wanted him to play Jim Rummy was, other than he was just too busy to do stuff like that. I mean,
the whole point of that was it was a really lazy excuse to get Christopher Robin in the park where Pooh meets him. I thought that was very sloppily done, how he found him. That was one of my gripes. But that was it. He was trying to avoid him. He went into the field or into the park.
It would have been that he was just so frustrated and tired he needed a break, and he just walked out into like a park and just sat on the bench just to think about things, and then all of a sudden, boom, he pops up. That's all you had to do. You didn't have to have all that. It just seemed kind of a waste, because I would have been okay with that if like at the end of the movie he goes back home and the guy's like, hey, let's play Jim Rummy, and he's like, yeah, let's go, let's play, let's have fun, you know what I mean? But no, none of that happened. It just was kind of a waste of a character.
The payoff later on.
Yeah.
So you could see that he was a little. He was like, oh. So if you could see where he was like, he caught up with his childhood and he like wants to play games and relax and have fun and not be so uptight and busy. That would have been a good payoff. That would have made sense.
Yeah,
but I would just spend time with just watching Christopher Robin being awkward to his neighbors. Like, if anyone's going to have fun as an adult, play games with your neighbor, it's Christopher Robin.
Yeah. So I thought that there were some. However, I think that there were a lot of these gripes are coming from. I feel like it's the same thing that Star Wars fans have with The Last Jedi, and that you've had an idea of how this should go, and it didn't go your way, so you're not quite as satisfied with it. And I think that's the way it is. In my mind, this could have gone a way different way, and I'm kind of dissatisfied with the way it went because it just wasn't the way I envisioned it. But it's still, they did well with the story. Like, for example, there were things that I liked, like as he's in the 100-acre wood and he's trying to explain to Pooh why it is that he is the way he is now, and saying, I'm different now. Like, we have to be responsible. And my kid, she likes to work. You know, that's what she likes to do. Almost like he's telling Pooh that I was wasting my time hanging out with you. You know what I mean? Like I was wasting my time being your friend. And that's when Pooh says that line. I thought it was the best line of the
Or
book.
Just that I've moved on. Like, this is not important anymore.
Yeah, and I had the best line of the whole thing was he's talking about I was going to have to let these people go. And he goes, well, did you let me go? Or something like that. Did that mean you let me go? And he's like, yeah, I guess I kind of did. You know, like how sad was that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who has been his best friend. Almost like, you know, you telling your dog that you hate him. You know what I mean? Like that type of thing. I do that to my dog all the time. But like, you know, that type of thing. It pulled at the heartstrings a lot, and I thought that was a good commentary. Now, my biggest gripe is I hate the political undertones of this movie. This is a commentary on capitalism, and you can tell by the way that they've got the guy on top who's kind of his supervisor that's always going out and playing golf while he's doing the work and taking all the credit, and how, you know, they're the ones who are always having all the fun. Meanwhile, Christopher Robin, and he doesn't care about his employees at all. He doesn't want, you know, he doesn't care if you have to cut 20% or whatever. Christopher Robin's the one agonizing over this because he's one of them, but he's got to make this hard decision. I hate that. I think that's totally stupid. There is a way to have a career where you work really, really hard and a lot of hours and still take the time to go with your kids. And I think that they did a good job of this, because you can totally understand why on this weekend Christopher Robin could not go to the cottage. Okay, there was a chance that he was going to have to let go of like 20% of the workforce, and those people rely on him, and he has to find a way to be able to keep them and keep their jobs, which the owner of the company always promised them they'd have after the war. Totally makes sense. But they did a good job of explaining, well, it wasn't just this weekend. There's always that. He's always, every weekend, he's never going. And his kid is going to go off to boarding school, and she doesn't even want to go. And
he was going to push on that same cycle. Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
And she had never had the opportunity to have what he had before, because she'd never had the imagination and done those things.
And when they send her out to play, she's like, well, what is there to do? And her mom's just like, you start by exploring, and then something will happen. And she goes in the backyard and she's like playing with the balloon, and she's just playing tennis by herself. I'm like, well, that's kind of sad. I mean, it's okay, but
that's also a good commentary on the kids today, because kids today, if you tell them to go out and play, don't necessarily know what to do, because they're used to playing video games inside and constantly being entertained. You know, it's very, I mean, you know, we go out to Wyoming usually for a few weeks every summer, where there's not a lot of video games and do all these things, and my kids for about 2 or 3 days have a real hard time figuring out what it is that they're supposed to do. You know what I mean? And so I could totally see that if you've never been out there and done that. But I also thought it was really interesting when they said, well, something will happen. She goes out, she finds the balloon, and then Pooh and everybody appears to her, right? And then she's kind of on her own adventure, even though it's a very reckless adventure at that. So
yeah.
But I don't like the fact that they're pushing this narrative of anti-capitalism, which is very obvious in this. I don't appreciate that, because Pooh is not a political commentator. You know, it's not political commentary. It's just something that we want to enjoy, and it's really disheartening to me that you can't even watch a show without some sort of political undertone. In every movie, it seems like there's got to be something about social justice or inequality or something. Why can't we just be entertained for 2 hours?
I'm glad this movie wasn't 2 hours. Was it 2 hours? It felt like 2 hours, but
about an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah. All right. Well, that aside, and I understand what you're talking about, and I always see that in movies all the time, and I think it was more misplaced in Star Wars than it was here, but that's okay. So let's continue on with the story. So there's things that bother me, things I like. Those are your two big gripes. We're gonna get into my total, like, I'm totally lost and irritated moments. That was the biggest one for me, was that other people could see them. If they're real magical stuffed animals, one, where did they come from? What are the rules of the 100-acre wood? The tree like appeared in his backyard, and it was a throwaway line to explain that, where Winnie the Pooh is like, oh, I guess it just shows up when you need it. I was like, okay, that's all you got? Like, if you're gonna make him a real character in the real world, there needs to be some connection, some explanation. You know, it just made no sense for the way the story always was, and that just irritated me. But going back to where they transition, as I said, I didn't like seeing them all at first. I think what would have been kind of cool is if, while they were in the 100-acre woods, they were animated, like the old traditional drawings, the way they did in the original movie, kind of like SpongeBob, where when they come into the real world, then you see them three-dimensional with texture. But that would have made that opening scene where you can see them all, but you hadn't had the reveal of what they really look like. Or just did that opening part like that with little boy Christopher Robin and all colorful with animation like that, where there's that Wizard of Oz contrast where you saw him full of color and full of life as a child imagining this, and then as he got older, colors and everything went to these boring browns and reds in his life. And then when he goes back, now the 100-acre woods is the way we saw it. It's dry, it's fall, there's leaves everywhere, and it's just dark. And then he meets the characters one by one in this real life texture, which the real life texture was awesome, but it just would have been an interesting way to do that. I think that's two different ideas they could have had. I like your idea too, just having just Winnie the Pooh in the beginning, have that beautiful moment on the hill, which was always just emotional and deep, and that sets the stage for what's going to happen in the story. That would have been good, because you saw Winnie the Pooh. We saw plenty of Winnie the Pooh in the trailer, but that would have set up the reveals later on when he comes back. I like that. It totally made no sense. And in the very end, what's the big problem? You know, this movie ended on a, well, who cares? Nothing matters now. Yeah, we saved the people at the luggage company, and we can come visit 100-acre woods as a family, because it's a geographical place. It's not an emotional or mental state of mind. And we can just go there. They can come here. They can live in our apartment. We can go see them all the time, and we can sneak them out to the grocery store. There was no purpose. There was no weight. And that was the biggest problem. There was no weight. Remember at the end of Hook? He had the adventure. He remembered who he was. He saved his family, but he had to go back. And he didn't go back and grow up and forget Neverland, but he had to go back, and he had to have that balance of being a responsible adult. He still had to take care of his family and figure out his career, but he also had to keep staying true to who he really was inside as the boy. You know, this movie, like, well, there's no separation. We don't need to learn how to balance that, because you're just an imaginary, or you're just a real magical stuffed animal that can live with me anytime you want anyway. So it was like there was no tension, there was no sadness, there was no break, there was no separation, there was no real life consequences or changes that you have to adapt to, which is what happens. You grow up, you have to adapt and evolve. This one, there's like, oh, it doesn't matter. And even Hook did that.
Yeah, I think it would have been a better deal to do it similar to like Toy Story at the end of that, where, okay, Christopher Robin's grown up now, and he doesn't necessarily need the companionship.
Mm-hmm.
But
exactly.
Now his daughter does, right? And it could carry on with her, or it could be a situation where they shared it together. and it's something that bonded him and his daughter together as this imaginary 100-acre wood. Whereas now, it's still like, I don't even think it's, to me, I don't know if it's like a place where like a physical place. I don't know if that's where it's at or not. Like, is this really just a physical place like Narnia that you can go into the wardrobe and
exactly? That's another example too. At the end of Narnia, they had to go back and separate, forget.
Or is this a place where it's an imaginary place that they as a family now go to together? It seems like it's more like a Narnia, but then again, at the same time, the connection between Christopher Robin and him losing himself and the darkness of the 100-acre wood, and the fact that Pooh comes out and he's in London rather than back at the cottage, leads me to believe that there's a connection between Christopher Robin's imagination and the 100-acre wood. So
that everyone on the street can see.
That's what I'm saying, though. Is it seemed to me like I was thinking to myself, okay, so can they really all see, or is this just Christopher Robin? And yeah, at times it felt like maybe Christopher Robin was just imagining all of this, but at the same time, no, because at the cab, clearly Christopher Robin wasn't even there. You know what I mean? So
right.
I guess I
think it was just poor writing. I think it was just they had the story idea and they took it, but the way it was just like Smurfs. It was a way to put the characters in a real life scenario so that you could have them in the car or have the jokes and have people observing and he's crazy, or that the donkey was staring at me. Just those few lines. You can't sell those jokes if the people can't see them acting that way. And I think that's the only reason they really wrote it like that. There was no other need. You could have had it with a daughter, and like I use the example of Puff the Magic Dragon in the book, in the book along with the story. At the end of it, Jackie Draper, whatever it is, he grows up, and at the end, in the last couple pages, you see his daughter interacting with Puff, and he's now grown up and he moves on, where the magic is now passed on, but it was still his imaginary character or friend. You know, that it would have been just as, or much better, I think, because this one had no point. There was no point other than your what you said about the capitalism, all that, and just stay in touch with your imagination, but you don't have to if you have a magic doll. That's what it was.
I think that also, if this were just a situation where, like Hook was a situation where it was not a commentary, I felt, on the state of capitalism in the world. I felt like it was just a situation of one guy who just was a workaholic and spent all of his time working. And
priorities were off. Yeah.
Priorities were off. This one, I didn't feel like that. I felt like this one was all, his priorities were where they were supposed to be. He wanted to be with his kids. He wanted to be doing those things, but he couldn't because of his job. So it was like a thing where, because he has to work so hard to maintain his thing, he's losing out on all these other things. And it's just, that's what bothers me, is that there's this idea out there that if you're working hard, you must be neglecting other things. If you are working, if you're working exorbitant hours, you must be neglecting your kids. If you're well off, then you're doing it off of the backs of other people, and you don't care what happens to your workers. Like, that type of stuff is just not true. It's just not. It's just a narrative that they're trying to fill, and I didn't think it was appropriate. I think you could have very well have just been a situation where Christopher Robin was just a hard worker because he was providing the nice things for his family, and he had to keep working it on. In that aspect, I identified a lot with Christopher Robin, because when you are working hard like that, it is hard to keep a balance. And I think it's important for us to understand that aspect, is that when you are working hard, when you are trying to maintain your family, and you are doing things and you are sacrificing imagination and other things for things of the world that need to be done, it is important to take a step back and be with your family. But it doesn't mean that the entire system is rigged against you. So.
No, and I think they tried to do it that way, where they're presenting that he had forgotten. And when his daughter found the drawing, he looked at it, and you could tell something touched. Ewan McGregor's a genius actor, but he was kind of in touch. But he's like, I just don't have time I can't process or deal with this. He was more thinking about where she was, and he can't be with the family at the cottage. And then he knocks over the honey. I didn't understand that relevance, the honey spilling on the. My son leaned over and thought that maybe that brought them to life, but that didn't make any sense. And I was like, I don't know who knocks over that big of a weight of a jar and doesn't stop and clean it up. I'm sorry, he's not that busy. That's a huge mess. That was disgusting. But he did that, and he goes on. But the other thing was the acorns, where she found the drawing, and then she was showing him the acorns that he was given in the beginning of the movie. He's just like, he didn't care about that stuff anymore. And I don't know if he had forgotten what the acorns represented when Pooh gave them to him, or whoever did. Yeah, it was Pooh, right? But he just didn't care. His priorities were so off, but he couldn't imagine or remember. And that reminded me kind of like the marbles and everything in Hook, where there were these little things from his childhood that he didn't care about anymore. It didn't matter to him. He had forgotten about the importance of it.
Well, the difference between Hook, though, is he couldn't remember any of it. It's not that he didn't remember the importance. He literally did not remember.
And that was a Neverland. That was part of the story. That's what Neverland does, yeah. But.
So, yeah, I mean, there were some things that were good. It wasn't, we get in these conversations where we're talking about all these bad things that we didn't like about the movie, but there were so many good things about it as well. I thought the characters, like I said in the spoiler-free version, were so well done, and they had their moments. I loved the little thing where he sees him and he's floating down the river just like in the cartoon. I thought that was funny. I also loved how like Ewan McGregor jumps in the water and it only goes up to like not even his knees, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm bigger now." I thought that was cute.
That was cute. I was like, it was a little exaggerated. It's not like he didn't know that wasn't really going to be a waterfall. Well, and the other thing that scene I thought was funny. Seeing a cartoon Eeyore in the water is one thing, but when you have this animated stuffed animal and he picks him up and he just drops him, I was like, okay, he would have been soaking wet and really heavy when he picks him up and puts him under his arm. I just wanted Christopher Robin just to like ring out Eeyore because it would make sense as a stuffed animal, even though it'd be kind of creepy as a visual for the kids watching him just like grip and twist his friend. But that was weird that he like sets him down and he's like perfectly dry. I'm like, no, he'd be saturated and ruined for weeks like that. And little things like the honey on Pooh all over his mouth and everything. That was a fun scene in his house, but like in the apartment. But I was like, okay, that is going to be in his plush for like forever, and that's what he's going to be all hard and gross. And even if he tries to wash and clean him up, it was like, he's not just going to be like brisk around like he was just a brand new stuffed animal. But anyway, those were just little nitpicky things. But I love the characters. I agree. I think the texture, like I said, their clothes was really cool. I love that Winnie the Pooh woke up and did his the exercise, the appetite dance or song, the up down song. He was wearing the nightgown, the exact same one that he wore in the original movie when during the Effluence of Woozle song. I loved Eeyore, like you said, he was hilarious, and I loved his his lines were the funniest. I was laughing out loud several times with Eeyore, and I love where he's like, I wouldn't go in there if I were us, stuff like that, or oh, now he thanks for kidnapping me and stuff. He was hilarious, and he was really kind of kept the beat. He was like the only thing that really kept the beat.
And I also like that they did the whole thing where he lost his tail and they had to put the tail back on him. That was kind of funny.
A little creepy. It was like a little rat or something he was dragging around. It was kind of weird.
I liked that. I liked. I thought Tigger was cute. I loved him singing his little song, and they were all like, "He does this all the time." I thought that was kind of.
I thought that was funny. I just think this song was kind of downplayed.
Well, it was, but I think it was funny because all of the characters were like, "Yeah, get used to it. He's gonna sing this."
He does that a lot.
That was kind of funny, and I thought that they all had their spots. The criticism I have is that some of the characters just didn't have enough screen time. Kangaroo, Rabbit, and Owl didn't have very much screen time at all.
I don't care about any of those except for Rabbit. I think Rabbit is one of the most underplayed characters in this movie. I think him going back to the city would have been a lot of fun. He would have been the one trying to assess everything and figure things out, and wrongfully, or even if Al was there, but wrongfully identifying what was going on and what things were. I think that would have been kind of fun. Kind of like your Scuttle from Little Mermaid. I think Al could have been like that, but I think Rabbit's interaction with them and his panic with all those little chase scenes and everything they were trying to do that really didn't pay off in the last act. Rabbit's being too hyped up and freaked out all the time and nervous and anxious about everything would have made those scenes a lot funnier. I think he was a character that was missing. And the other thing with him, I think we got a flavor of what a live-action Watership Down movie would look like, because he was very realistic looking, and it was kind of creepy, but it was cool. I think I can totally envision a movie of Watership Down with that animation for Owl, which is not Disney, but I don't know. He was really cool looking. I liked Owl or Tigger or sorry, Rabbit a lot.
So, really a cool little Easter egg, and I'm sure you caught this too, was the part where Ewan McGregor's trying to come through the door and he gets stuck. And, like, I've been there before, you know. I thought that was kind of a funny little thing there. I loved just some of the little things that, I mean, are part of the story that I loved. I just, for some reason, I really loved how he came out and it still says Mr. Sanders above his.
Yeah.
Why? You know, like, I don't know. And so there's that.
You know, I didn't like Piglet. Piglet was weird.
You don't like Piglet anyway. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I don't. But he was kind of like Gollum in the beginning. When he first finds him, he's like talking to himself and he's like saying "we," like he's talking about himself, like in plural. And it was just as he was trying to chase the acorns and stuff, and he finally led him to the tree trunk where they're all hiding. It was just kind of weird. It was like kind of creepy, and like he didn't really do anything necessary the entire time. And his whole thing is where he's always scared. He wasn't really even scared in this, other than in the tree, but they were all scared. So it was like, what was the point of Piglet? He was just kind of dumb. I don't know. Sorry, I just don't like Piglet. He's just an annoying character.
I liked the whole thing with Christopher Robin fighting the heffalumps and woozles. I thought that funny, because I loved how he's starting to discover, okay, what would I have done in this situation? It was kind of part of his finding himself. Like, okay, I'm going to imagine that I'm fighting the heffalumps and woozles, so these people, you know, these characters can calm down and accept it. And Eeyore was a part of it, right?
And
like,
he was figuring like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I see what's going on. And he's like, you are Christopher Robin, yeah.
Yeah, so there was that moment I thought was really good too. And I also loved, you know, the realization that his kid needed time with him, and his kid needed time to have her own imagination. They hit home for me a lot because, as I said earlier, I work a lot of hours, and you know, that's why we have to do these videos so late at night, and sometimes we look so tired. So give us some slack, fans. But so it kind of hit home for me to remind me that there's more to life than just being in the office. But that just means that there's a way that you can do both. Like I did like the ending in that he said, give everybody a chance to go on vacation. You know, give everybody a chance to go on a paid vacation. They can go out and spend time with their families, and they'll purchase your luggage so that they can do it. You know, so I thought that was good too. I thought the overall message of the movie was good. The tone was just a lot darker than you would expect in a Pooh movie.
I agree. The only thing I thought about the story, I like that we're going nowhere and doing nothing, dialogue and everything. It was a really good way of coming in. But I really liked in the opening credits where or not the credits, before the credits, where it showed the book pages, where it showed a little recreation of those openings or the scenes from the first movie, the pulling out of the hole and the honey tree and everything, showing Christopher Robin's interaction helping his friends. I think that was really well done. But there was no tension. I said that earlier, but the thing is, even in the meeting at the end where he was like, I have to make a decision, do I stay here in the meeting and try and help the people? The whole movie was built up around this meeting, or the story. Or do I go and help my son or my daughter who's missing? Of course he's going to go run after the daughter who's missing, but as he's walking out the door, he didn't say anything. He didn't even say, oh my gosh, my kid is missing, I got to go. Anyone in real life would have actually done that. They don't just like give that weird awkward glance in the room and like and then just go. It was just weird. And so there was no stakes because they didn't throw it on the line like in Elf. You remember in Elf when the same thing happened, Buddy was gone and the dad was in the meeting with the publishers and the heads of the company, and they were saying, no, we're doing this meeting right now. I don't care if it's Christmas Eve, and if you walk out that door, it's your job. He's like, I don't care. And he made the call right there, and he decided because there was a threat. That's what made it heavy. In this one, there was no threat. He was just like awkward. He was there, and he just kind of leaves and like, well, I guess we'll look at other options. And then they had the other proposal, and he came back at the end. He's like, oh, I know what we'll do. I didn't feel that like, you know what, I'm being carefree right now. This is what's more important than being a grown up responsible adult. Same thing in Mary Poppins. When Mr. Banks went back after there was the run on the bank and he was in trouble, he went back and he told the joke about the man with the wooden leg named Smith. He's just laughing and said, I don't even care, and he left. And they were so serious that it had tension, that there was weight in that scene. That's what made his walking out important, because it was a decision he had to make, and there was a scale there. This one, it was just nothing. Now, maybe I just over glorified it in my mind, but I just think a lot of other movies have done that same scenario better.
Yeah, I agree. It could have been done better. It could have been done better. I agree with you. I think but again, I think that the message was carried well. In the end, you get the understanding of it. The secret scene at the end, I wasn't.
What was that?
I was kind of confused by what that was and what that was supposed to be, and it feeds into that whole imagination thing. Like, so Pooh and them are just hanging out on the beach with all the workers. Like, what?
Oh, was that the workers?
Yeah.
I was lost. I was like, is this some kind of old cut from one of the first animators or something? And I was just trying to figure, and then it scrolled over and showed them like they animated the characters into this old time footage. I couldn't figure it out at all.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what was going on there. But yeah, I mean, I think I've covered all the things that I thought could have been done better. I think that I loved Ewan McGregor. I thought his wife did a good job, though her role was probably a little bit smaller than it could have been. I loved the daughter. I thought that she did a great job with her role. And I actually hope that there is a sequel to this. Now that we've gotten past all of the dreary problems that Christopher Robin has, I hope that there are some more live action Winnie the Poohs with Madeline Robin in it. I think that would be fun.
Can I say I don't really care about a sequel? This movie didn't capture me enough that I'd want to see more. When the Grand Adventure of Winnie the Pooh came out, I was so excited, and then I cried at that one too. But it felt like a continuation of this character, this story, these real characters. This one, I was like,
well, I think this was I think that this would be just an origin story for the next part of the chapter. You're not going to get all the dreariness that you got in this one and the next one. He's found himself, so now you're going to get adventures, and that's all you're going to get. So,
but that's the thing. The adventures themselves in 100 Acre Wood are not as interesting as the emotion wrapped around it. That's why the adventure in the 100 Acre Woods in this movie, it didn't really hook me.
Well, I'm sorry that you are just an emotional wreck. Okay.
Oh, is that it? And have been ever since I was 6 years old.
But I think that I would enjoy a live action sequel to this. And I think it would be fun. If done right, I think it could be done well, and it could get past all this dreariness and do it a little bit differently. So,
let me throw a few hook things at you. So the comparisons there where he forgot the acorns, that was similar to Peter forgetting or not caring about the marbles when he was watching, what's his name? I can't remember. The other lost boy that was there, living there, his marbles and the connection and how that was his happy thought and everything. He forgot all about that. How he didn't connect with the drawing, that reminded me of how when Wendy was trying to show him the book and teach Peter, tell him who he was, and it wasn't hitting him until someone from the land had to come, Tinkerbell had to come get Peter, and Pooh had to come get Ewan McGregor, same thing. When he looked I don't know if you noticed, when he was looking in the stream at one point, he saw himself as a boy. Did you notice that?
I didn't notice that. It's interesting.
In Hook, he did the same thing. When he found the baseball, he saw himself as a young boy. When he went to the owl's house was on the ground. He's like, oh, it fell down again. But as he was inside and looking and looking and trying to find what was going on or whatever, and then he found the acorns, that reminded me of when Peter found the original old house before Hook burned it. And then the moment, obviously the one in the trailer, was like looking at the face. Oh, there you are, and he's like, "You're there. You're just more wrinkly or whatever." that was exactly like the Lost Boys who were trying to find Peter in this grown man. But there was a lot of little things that tied me. I'm not saying it was a ripoff of Hook. I'm just saying there was plenty there that made it feel like it was a very, not stolen, but just a redone tone of this story of a fantasy character.
But it was done differently enough that, and you may think that differently enough in a bad way, who knows, but I think it was done differently enough to differentiate it from Hook. The tone of this movie was certainly different. And I think even though the moral was kind of the same.
Similar. Yeah, very similar. A little different. I agree with you where you're saying he's not a workaholic. It's just, I mean, he is, but it's not like how Peter was. Peter was obsessed with success. Christopher was just, he was kind of, his hands were tied because he was taking on a lot of responsibilities and he never took the time to step back. Just like when Joseph Smith said, a bow that's constantly strung will eventually lose its spring. It's the same thing, same concept.
Well, I think he also, the motivations were different in that Peter Pan was already successful and he was just a workaholic, and that he wanted to keep getting the success even though he was already successful. Whereas I felt
obsessed. Yep.
I felt like Christopher Robin was more, I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this because I'm trying to give us a better life, and this is how I do that. And so I think that was a little different too. A little bit different. I guess it's a little bit different motivation for each of them.
So my favorite lines in there, I wrote a few of them down. I thought they were great. When Eeyore was like, "Well, thanks for kidnapping me," he was just trying to find out. He had no control over where his fate was taking him with this woozle that was stealing him. I thought that was funny. Where he said to Pooh, where he said nothing is impossible, and he said it is funny. I do nothing every day. I like that. Where he's talking to Pooh and he wakes up and he's like, "Oh no, it's tomorrow," and he says, "Oh, that's strange. Usually it's today." That was so funny. Which was another dumb thing. He goes there, he finds the group, they know it's Christopher, they go up, he's like, "Oh, but we gotta find Pooh." He goes right to the hill, he finds Pooh, and he walks up. They're right there on the horizon. He walks to Pooh, sits down, they hug for a second, and instantly they're asleep. It's the next morning, and the rest of the group walks over to him. Like, where did they go overnight? Like, it made no sense. They were just standing on the hill, staring at them, fall asleep, cuddling, and then they walk down like in the morning. I was like, what happened here?
What was that quote? I thought there was one thing that he said that was really funny. It was something along the lines of, "Remember when yesterday was tomorrow?" Like, that was bad, like that.
Yeah.
Remember when yesterday was tomorrow?
Yeah, that was fun. That was right at that last moment too. I loved it. Hit me where he said, "It's always a special day when Christopher comes to play." I thought that was really sweet. And then he looks and he's like, that was the scene you're talking about, and he's like, I'm not who I am. I'm not the same person anymore. And he says, "I'm lost, Pooh." And he says, "But I found you, didn't I?" I thought that was really touching, that internal imaginary character is always there to that you can't totally be lost if that person that's your inner self is there, as long as this movie doesn't mess it up and make it a magical stuffed animal that everyone can see. Anyway. And I love when he said at the end, he said, I've been a father of a little brain. I thought that was cute. A lot of good jokes, good humor. I laughed out loud multiple times, and the families behind us and in this relatively empty theater, they were laughing like through the whole movie. So good for kids. It just threw me off for some of the plot points.
That's something I was surprised at, in that I would have thought there would have been more of an interest in this movie. I like, my theater was not super filled either. I mean, it was full. It was like 3/4 full. But
mine was a matinee on a Monday the following week, so
mine was on Friday, and it was a little early. Like, I got off of work a little bit early to go see the movie with my kids, and we were able to get tickets, I think, the day before. So it was like, we go and we buy the tickets to the ones where you have the assigned seats, right? And so we bought assigned. Usually, if you were going the day before, you're not going to get good seats. But most of the theater was pretty full, or was pretty open. When we got there were more people there than I thought there were going to be, but it wasn't full by any means. So, interesting.
Yeah, it was fun. I'm glad. I'll buy it just because I love the franchise. I love the characters, but you know, I was a little disappointed. It didn't rip my heart out like I wanted it to. But,
Yeah.
oh well.
And again, as I said at the beginning, I think that this is more a victim of us having way too high expectations, because most of
This franchise can always hit that mark. They've always been able to do that.
Even though not all of the movies are always fantastic, they always hit you in the feels. And this one didn't quite hit you in the feels the way that you'd hoped. It hit you in the feels in a different way.
Yeah.
And it was not a Winnie the Pooh way, but this isn't a Winnie the Pooh movie. It's a Christopher Robin movie. So
I know, but it's a story. I really think if at the end he had to say goodbye in whatever manner they needed to, even if it was passing on to his daughter, whatever happened, Peter was still Peter Pan. He came back. He still was full of hope and exciting. He was going to go enjoy watching his kids grow up. And he said to live is an awfully great adventure. He was still a much better person reuniting with who he was as a child. But you still have to grow up. You still have to move on. And there's still transition in our lives. I think at some point, Chris Robin there still needed to be that part where he needed to tuck Winnie the Pooh back into his imaginary land, not this fictitious place that like Narnia that he can go in and out of whenever he wants. So, I don't know. Yeah. But what did you think about Christopher Robin? Did you like it? Do you have no interest in seeing it? Do you think we just hold it too high of a standard because we're jerks and have no heart?
Or maybe we're just pathetic being 37 and 38 years old and still hanging on to our Winnie the Pooh love.
We really are.
Yeah.
I know I am.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for watching. Sorry this one went on a little long. We just had a lot to say, but we'll catch you next time. And on Saints on Cinema, I am Tim Wild.
I am Josh Edlow.
Thanks for watching, guys.